if you're going to spend your life with this person, personally, if I was worried that my partner was going to leave me for something that I did 5 years ago, I would feel like that is not the right relationship.
All right, this one is pretty spicy, and I wonder if we have different feelings about this. It's a bit of a long one, but bear with me because I think it's worth it. When I was 18, I had a huge body insecurity and felt like I was unlovable unless I got my boobs done. I also could not find a job at the time and thought the way to pay for my boobs was to get into escorting. I was really young, I was really naive, and had only had one sexual experience before getting into escorting, which is, really it's crazy
0 to
stuff.
100, isn't it?
I did it for 3 months, but couldn't continue because of my mental health. But I did go back to it a little bit when I was 19, and I saw a client a handful of times before deciding that that was it. I was never going to do escorting again. After I finished escorting, I decided to go to therapy, and I was in a really bad place. Going to therapy completely changed my life. I have now got a career, I finished my degree, and I also have met my now partner who I've been with for 1 year. I'm only 24 years old. My question is, should I tell my partner about my past, and do I need to? And if so, how should I go about doing it? Unfortunately, I do feel like there is still so much stigma around the sex industry. Now, while he's incredible, I have heard him make comments about strippers that he had once slept with, saying that she was, just a stripper, as if it meant that she was less than. Aside from that, he's very caring, thoughtful, emotionally intelligent. He's also secure and perhaps would struggle to understand what I was going through at 18, 19. I really want to be with him forever, and I don't want anything to risk coming between us. Do you think she needs to tell him? And if so, how and should she?
Just to start with, I'm sorry that you even felt like you had to go and get boobs to feel attractive. Like even just
horrible.
The opening line is like, my insecurities were so bad that I had to get boobs. Then you felt like you had to do escorting to get the boobs. I have a lot of issues around that because it just makes me feel sad that we're in that place. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the fact that you have to tell your current partner about your past. There is no right and wrong, and there is no black and white answer for this question. This is so dependent on how you feel internally about moving forward, about your communication with your partner, about your honesty, what shame you have attached and why. At the end of the day, I don't think you have to tell anybody anything that you don't want. And we always talk about ownership of a story and who owns it. And you own your story. If you don't feel comfortable or you want to forget a part of your life for whatever reason, then of course you can do that. There are a lot of people, and I have a feeling you may fall into this category just because you've written the question in. A lot of people feel like withholding information from a partner is a form of lying, which to some people it will be deemed that way and to some people it's not. If you feel like you want to get this, I want to say off your chest, because you are thinking about it enough to write in this question to us. Do I have to tell him? I feel like I want to tell him, but there's still shame attached. Then yeah, I think you can have the conversation. And I think if somebody loves you enough and you said you want to be with this person forever and marry them. If somebody loves you enough, they're not going to leave you because of something like this that you did 4, 5, 6 years ago or ever. Like if they love you now for who you are, it shouldn't matter. That is definitely easier said than done. Like it's easy for me to sit here and say, if he loves you, he'll accept you. He might not. That says more about him than it's going to say about you. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I also think it's important to acknowledge that time is not an indicator of where a relationship is at. So you said you've been with him for 1 year. That doesn't mean that you are at a place where he is ready to receive information that may impact your relationship. And I also want to unpack this a little bit because something you said is it was a really dark place for you and escorting was not something that you did or that you reflect on as being a good part of your life. Like we've talked about escorting in a really sex positive way on this podcast. We've said, sex work is real work. All of that is very, very true, but it is not true if you're doing it because you have no other option and it is filled with shame and filled with regret. Like that is a really devastating place to be at. And I'm so glad that you were able to get yourself out of it and to get the help and the therapy that you so deeply deserve in order to really change the way that you feel about your body and you feel about your value. But also it makes me think that you see it as it's being shameful as well because you are so fearful to share this information because you have regret around it. Does it define the person that you are? And does it in any way shape the person that you are now and how you are in your relationship? I think that to me is a kind of an important thing to unpack and unpick. And I know Britt and I, we had a little bit of a discussion about this beforehand, but I really don't think you have to tell everything to your partner, especially of a partner of only 1 year. It's okay to breadcrumb and to drip bits of your story throughout your relationship and as you become closer and more connected to someone. And if you think that this story and this conversation, this part of your life is going to make him up and leave you, then maybe he isn't at a place, or your relationship isn't at a place where he deserves to know that yet. And now it's a different story if in 4 years' time or 3 years' time or however long you've invested in the relationship and you're like, oh no, he would dump me if I told him this about my past, then that just makes him not the right person. But I do think that it is okay for you to choose the people and choose the time of which you share the really, really traumatic and hard parts of your life with. And I say this because, both, even in my own situation, Matt and I have both had big things from our childhoods and from our life. And Matt still tells me things about his childhood and still tells me things that I never knew about him. It never will change the way I feel about him, but he still tells me parts of his story that I'm just uncovering. We've been together for 7 years. So every relationship is different. And I don't think that everything has to be told. Every single part of you has to be told to the person that you're in a relationship.
It just depends on you. I'm the kind of person that's an oversharer, and I want to know everything about my partner, and I want them to know everything about me. But that's just because it's who I am. Sometimes I say to Ben, like, why don't you ask more questions about my past? Like, I want us to know everything about each other, but that's how I want our relationship to be. I've been in relationships with other people in the past that have not wanted to know anything about my past. They couldn't care less because they're like, I don't care what you did. Like, we're here now and I care about our future. So I think that's more of a conversation you need to have with yourself first. What is our communication like? What are we like as individuals? What am I going to be comfortable going forward with? Because if you're going to think about this day in and day out for the next couple of years, 10 years, if you're together that long, if it's going to eat you up, is it worth it? If you're going to spend your life with this person, are you going to be more comfortable living every single day knowing that he loves you completely because he knows everything about you? Because this is obviously eating you up a little bit, which I hate. So for me, when I read this, I would say absolutely you do not have to tell him. We know that. But I would say if I was in your situation, I would want to tell him, A, I don't have to keep that secret anymore that's bothering me because it's bothering you. B, then I know that he loves me, for how I am. If I was worried that my partner was going to leave me for something that I did 5 years ago, personally, I would feel like that is not the right relationship with me. For me.
It's a really good litmus for whether he is in this for the right reasons and he's in this because of your relationship and because of you.
Yeah.
I just don't think that this is something that you need to feel this much shame for. And I know that we have such a bad perception in society around sex work, but I feel like you're carrying a lot of shame yourself. And even the way you worded the question around I did this for 3 months and then I went back and then I had to get therapy to straighten my life out. I think that there is way more loaded into this than the escorting, because you didn't do the escorting from a place of almost free will. It wasn't like it was the thing that you were really excited to do and an occupation and career that you wanted to get into. We had a conversation with Angela Wyatt on the pod quite a while ago now. Well, it was this year, but she's one of the world's most famous porn stars. And she talks about sex work in just the most positive, and it was a different mindset towards it, right? But that is not your mindset. And so I think the fact that you feel as though you need to admit this thing, you didn't do anything wrong.
No.
You didn't hurt anyone. You didn't commit a crime. You just were going through something that for a period of time, maybe for yourself, you didn't make the best choices for your own self. And I'm not saying that that's the case for everyone, but in this situation, it wasn't for you. I don't think you need to continue to punish yourself. If you think it's going to impact the way that your partner thinks of you, you don't need to have that conversation with him until you feel genuinely ready to have that conversation with him. You don't owe it to everyone to tell your story.
But I also think there's an opportunity here for a bit of education and maybe to squash some stereotypes, because you said that part of your reason for not wanting to tell him, it's not necessarily the shame you feel, but it's because you've heard him make comments like, I hooked up with someone once, but she was, quote, just a stripper. You've also gone on to say he's very emotionally intelligent. I think there's an opportunity here to squash how we view strippers and sex workers, to say to him, well, hey, I was once in that position where I was paid to be with people and you love me. Like, let's not demoralize these people with these throwaway comments like, oh, she's just a stripper, like she's less than. I don't know. I think sometimes normalizing these conversations, if you can get yourself to a point where you're okay with it internally, go to some more therapy. But if we normalize these conversations that this is people's job, people do work, it doesn't make you any less than because that is your line of work. We know that, exactly like you just said with Angela White. She's an incredible woman who makes absolute bank doing something she absolutely loves at the end of the day. So yeah, I just think do what's going to be right for you in this situation. If you think you can't live without this playing on your mind, have the conversation. But there's no rush and no need to do it to say that you're in a long-term stable relationship. If you decide to never, ever tell him and take that piece of your life to the grave, that is also okay.
Yeah. And the only thing I want to add, which I know we talked about a little bit at the beginning, but I kind of want to come full circle on it, is this idea about time not being the benchmark for how connected you are to someone. You may think that he's the person that you want to be with for the rest of your life, but have your conversations met up to that point? Like, is he doing the things and is he showing up in the relationship in a way that makes him deserving of knowing the, all the bits and pieces that make up your story? And I think that that's something that you kind of have to unpack yourself and figure out, well, okay, yeah, I am at a place where I know that if I tell him things about myself, he won't judge me, because he loves me and supports me and wants to be with me for who I am today, not for the version of myself that I was in the past. And I think for anyone who shows up in a relationship with that level of intensity, he will go, okay, well, this is more information about you that I didn't know. Does it make me feel a bit of discomfort? Maybe, but I still love you. I still want to be with you. It doesn't change the way I feel about you. Like, that's the end goal. So I really think you have to be honest with yourself as to whether or not you think that he's capable of that.